Powered by their award-winning Averon World software and paired with industry-leading hardware, Averon's rower, bike, and treadmill deliver some of the most fun and effective workouts ever. Jump into a session, and before you know it, you're locked in, competing head to head, racing against the clock, or chasing your personal best. Averon's got everything from games and challenges to virtual rides, on demand classes, and the most streaming options out there. Sweat it out, get competitive, and look forward to your next cardio day. And the Averon Victory Treadmill just launched. It's the world's first gamified treadmill. That's right, the first gamified treadmill. And you get back into fitness for the new year with introductory pricing. Plus, head over to averonactive.com/uncrowned and get an extra $50 off. Go to AVIRON active.com/uncrowned to bring an end to boring workouts. Thank you so much, Averon. Well, lads, let me bring in the two boys.
Oh, there we are. There we are. We were hanging in the green room waiting for this. Hey, man, there we are.
I know. I didn't want you. I want you to be able to just feast on the spectacle of me doing the Averon read before I bring you in. Chuck Mindenhall, how are you first, bud? Detroit hat on today, I see.
Yeah, I like Detroit. You know, they're doing good things over there with the city. Great green room over here, by the way, man. You guys met my rider, all green M&Ms, Pedialyte. Thank you very much for that, Pete. I appreciate it, man.
On Air Jordan was picking through them M&Ms for days just to make you happy. So we're so glad that you could do that. Drake, welcome. Your first ever appearance on the Craic. I'm sorry, that's my fault.
Finally.
My fault for waiting so long. Thank you for the whole double shift thing. I'm sure you were told, listen, mate, when you go to Seattle, don't worry about it. Petesy's going to hit all the breaking news that comes out. I can only apologize, my friend. But congratulations on some great work on Wednesday.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I'm quite disappointed, though, Pete. So you waited till I'm not all set up in my studio and everything to have me on the show here. We're makeshift from a hotel room. Still happy to be on, though, my favorite of the 3 shows on our network. So I'm glad to be here, man.
Oh, here we go.
Listen,
kicking up some rivalries already. I love it.
Yep.
But
first one to bring me on.
Yeah, exactly. How is it over there, Drake? Like, I mean, the buzz seems quite like it's a very strong card, I feel. There's been a lot of buzz throughout the week. It feels a bit better from some of the fight night offerings we've got recently.
Yeah, no, it's definitely feels like, you know, everybody's treating it as a bigger deal than your typical Apex card, which is not a high bar to kind of surpass, of course. But, you know, Seattle in particular has been deprived from a UFC event since it was 2013. I didn't realize it had been 12 years. John Moraga, Demetrius Johnson, I believe, was the last event here. It was one of the DJ ones because they put him in Seattle, if you remember, for a couple of those UFC on Fox shows that he had. And essentially, that is what prevented them from coming back here. At least that was Dana's excuse. So we threw that blame onto Mighty Mouse, which is not very fair. But yeah, no, this week feels good. I think that the main card in particular is very solid and a lot better than some of the offerings that we are typically getting, again, with the Apex cards. And honestly, I think the main card for this event is better than what we got with 312 from like overall top to bottom. Certainly more ranked fighters and kind of ones with more impact to their fights that they have. So yeah, and there's more media here than kind of you would expect. I think people have been very excited to see Seattle, I think, as much as the fights that we have. But it's yeah, it certainly feels like everybody's really enjoying what we have lined up so far.
Yeah, I can't wait to pick your brain on all this towards the end. But as I said, we have to get some of your guys' takes on all this madness that happened. I know the lads got into it in great detail yesterday, between breaking news segments, that was. But 3:14, we get this news that Topuria is stepping away, and Volk and Diego Lopes are now going to fight for that vacant title. Chuck, I guess my first question is, if Volk wins back this title, is the conversation will it be tainted by the fact that it's come on the back of Ilia, the guy who's beaten him, vacating the title, or do you think we'll be back rejoicing in Volk and obviously one of the fan favorites out there? Do you think he will bypass that whole critique?
No, I don't think he bypasses it. I think that it will exist. It's, you know, it's almost like, well, the landlord is out, right? Like, so you can throw the party or whatever it is. I feel like if Volkanovski regains it, there will be a certain amount of like, wow, this dude, that is pretty crazy that he could reascend and end up in that spot. But we would know the situation. At least anybody who pays attention to what's been going on would know the situation. The guy that beat him and handily is no longer there. He's no longer warden. So you're sort of like, okay, there will be a tiny little asterisk on that. But I think that with a guy like Volkanovski, who ruled that division for something like over 4 years, right? It was like 4 years and change. It's almost like it doesn't really matter, does it? His legacy is so set. If he goes and wins it, if he wins it another time where he's holding the belt again, I feel like you can put whatever asterisk you want on it. He's already kind of set in terms of the legendary status in that division.
Do you like that matchup for the vacant title, Drake? Like when it came through, are you like, this makes sense? As we mentioned, Volka, legend of the division. Is it perfect for the UFC to have a guy you can slot into a situation like this? Obviously, we were preparing for a rematch, but obviously Diego Lopes now his opponent in this case. What do you think of it?
It's really fascinating. I love the matchup. I think you can't really go wrong with a lot of the potential ways you can mix and match people at 145 right now. And from a business perspective, it makes all the sense in the world. And Volkanovski is, of course, a guy who has undeniably earned his place, not just in history, but if anybody's going to get an immediate rematch or an immediate shot back at the title, like this is one of those guys. And we're going through very similar cases to, you look at what happened with Jose Aldo back in the day, when this is very similar to that, where he got his chance to fight for the title again, vacant title with the Frankie Edgar fight at UFC 200, the rematch there. This feels a lot like that to me. And from that sense, you look back at that time, I don't think people gave Aldo the full credit because he didn't end up getting it back over Conor, who beat him. But, you know, people kind of forget about that after so many fights that he continues to defend, because the community can be a little goldfish brained at times. So we'll see how it could play out here potentially if Volkanovski does the same thing. I think it's a super fun fight, and ultimately whether or not it was the right move just kind of depends on your perspective. Again, business-wise, I don't think there's really a question about it because of just who Volkanovski is and, again, his legacy. But in terms of meritocracy, you can make the argument for Movsar Evloev too, or just Movsar in there against Volk even. Like, there's different ways you could have mixed and matched that. But at the end of the day, just mentioning Movsar, that guy has got to be hoping and praying that Diego Lopes wins, because then it's guaranteed that he's getting right in there, has the storyline set up. That's his hope. If Volk wins, I think it's still pretty possible, but I don't feel as confident that he still might have to win another fight against who knows who, maybe even Diego Lopes. Like, I feel very bad for Evloev, though, getting left out here, because he totally deserves it, but I get how we got here.
Yeah, can you imagine? He has the victory over Diego Lopes, obviously with an asterisk given the nature of that being a debut in a late notice kind of situation. But still, you haven't lost since that fight or ever, undefeated, and you're the one sitting on the sidelines to watch the interim title play out. It's just it's a pretty crazy situation. I will say he kind of, like I wrote about this a little bit, he kind of defaults into a good situation, even not being part of this, because I think either way it goes, he's kind of the consensus guy, right? Like, he's got to be right there. Volkanovski, if he does regain the title, has beat so he would have beat Diego Lopes, who would be the obvious guy, but he's already beat Ortega. He's beat Holloway if he were, he would turn, like anybody, like almost everybody within that top space. I think everybody in that top five except for Evloev. So it would be one of those situations where I think he should be in the catbird seat regardless of who wins. But, the UFC has not shown that it's super aggressive in trying to get into the Movsar business yet. You know what I mean? So we'll see how it plays out.
What do you guys think is better for the division at this stage? And I don't mean this is any disrespect to Volkanovski, but I do feel as though if you put Lopes in there, it adds a bit of freshness to it. I know Volkanovski's a brilliant champion. I'm not putting this fight past him at all, but just in terms of moving the division on from Topuria, am I wrong, Drake, in thinking that it might be a better move for the UFC to have a new champion Lopes here?
Ooh, that's a great question, man. I think long term, definitely, because if Diego can end up holding on to it, which is still a big question mark there, because who knows, he could end up having to fight Volkanovski again as well. Like, there, I think, is still a decent amount left in the tank for Volkanovski, but you know, I think we've probably peaked on his popularity, as popular as he has become overall, and how willing to be that guy to step up that he is. And it's kind of become somewhat of a meme where he's like, I'll come in at welterweight if I need to. And like, all right, slow down, man. Let's not do that. But I mean, in terms of always trying to break into the Mexican market, or the South American markets and things like that, the Latin American markets, I should say. Diego Lopes is your guy, and he's become a massive superstar since he's gone on this run. So I don't know if I could say it's one over the other in terms of freshening things up. Definitely with Diego Lopes for obvious reasons, but I think they're in a pretty good spot either way with either guy as a champion. Maybe I guess I would slightly lean towards Diego if I had to go with one though.
I think at this point, just kind of broadly looking at it, that Diego would be the guy in the sense of he does bring a freshness. He hasn't really faced a ton of these guys at the top. This is almost like a completely expedited, situation where he's being kind of not rushed in. Like, I think he's deserved it the year he had last year, but like he's being put in that position where there are plenty of guys out there, which would be fresh matchups for the UFC. He's so fresh faced, and he's still got that baby face right now too. Like, everybody just kind of loves watching a fight. He always brings it. I think last year when they did that whole Dan Ige shuffle with Ortega, and he was just willing to do it, spoke volumes for the kind of fighter that he is. I think he would remain prolific for the UFC, just like Volk. I think that would all factor into this, but I mean, just that kind of youthful match, all the different matchups they could make. I think it'd be Diego. And I got to say, man, I met up with Diego. I wrote about this too in December. I think the piece came out in January. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And just kind of hung out with him and his crew for the whole night at this concert, and dinner beforehand and all that. And I was kind of like, at the time, you're like, what's happening with Diego? You're thinking it's going to be either Malvazar, or it's going to be maybe Yair. Like in Mexico City, this was kind of whispered about. And he was like, those are fine, but you could tell that they already knew and were counting on some level as plan A to fight Volkanovski for the interim belt. This is before you really I wasn't taking it serious that Islam would actually make that leap. I didn't think he could. I was like, well, his business isn't at 145 is not done,
Oh, like Ilia, sorry.
Yeah. Ilia, yeah. His business isn't done. So when they were talking about it, and they were talking about fighting Volk for the interim title, I was like, this seems like wishful thinking to me. Like, this is just a camp that's like trying to conjure something out of nothing. But obviously they knew some stuff was going on. And I have to say, the reason I bring any of this up, he was virtually licking his chops at that matchup. It was like, and so was everybody within that camp. They're all like, that's the fight we want. That's the fight we want, because they believe that they match it. I think that they see the Volk's probably on the decline, and they see themselves as on the up and ready to roll. And I think they love the matchup. So I think it's just, they see it as his time, and UFC obviously accommodated them perfectly for this.
Hang on, so you're doing this, and they keep on bringing this fight that isn't on your list at all.
It's not even on there, and to the point where I'm like, can I talk about this publicly? Like, is this? Are we off the record here? It's like one of those situations. You're like, because I hadn't really put a lot of thought into that idea. I did mention it in the piece. I was like, ideally this is what they would like, blah blah blah, and said that they love the matchup. But I was sort of like, I didn't really believe that they had insider information on it, even though it's Jason House and his guys and all that. I just thought that was more like, this is what we're lobbying for, that sort of thing.
That is crazy, man.
Yeah.
That is absolutely insane. You guys were mentioning Evloev earlier. Am I wrong? Like, if I'm Evloev's guys, I'm like, lads, if Patricio Pitbull gets off to a good start here, we have another problem, right? Like, because obviously Ariel feared that Patricio had played his cards, right? Like, he's played them out too publicly. He was saying, like, I want to go to the UFC. There's all this talk of like, well, what if that doesn't happen? He is getting his debut against Yair Rodriguez, who's come into a lot of criticism, and I think rightfully to some degree after the Ortega fight. It felt like it was set up for this guy. Like, we've talked about this before. Chuck's gone to see this guy in Mexico City. It felt like things were set up. Things did not happen. And now suddenly you're against Patricio Pitbull. And I'm kind of going, Evloev, you have a lot to worry about. As Drake said, he has not been put in the spot here. We have Patricio Pitbull, who can make a big statement against Yair, despite some of the conversations that are happening around Rodriguez. People will still kind of say, wow, what an amazing debut. I think GC likened it to Dan Hooker and Chandler when he came in, right? And all of the conversation
Yeah,
that sparked from
that's what it's
there.
like. Yeah.
Yeah. But Drake, would you be worried if you were Evloev's people and you saw Patricio Pitbull against Yair Rodriguez on the same card that the fucking title is being decided on?
Oh yeah, man, I'd be sweating bullets, dude. I mean, you got to think about this too. Fingers crossed, knock on wood, nothing happens with the title fight there, but it's on the same card. He's the backup, man. They're not giving it to Yair. I mean, they could, but like either way, they're in that spot where it all lines up to that kind of feel we love, where it's an unofficial mini tournament, right? Like where we can play with that as fans and all. But yeah, a guy like Patricio too, who he got about as close to what he could have, what he was asking for. You know, he wanted to get right into a title shot. Ideally, of course, that was never going to happen, but he can dream. Fair to him. But then he gets this fight with a top guy who's been around for a while in Yair Rodriguez. And you got to get out of Pitbull everything you have left. You're risking, if he wins this fight with Yair and putting him against someone else, let's say even if it is Evloev or a non-title fight or something like that, then he has a very real possibility of losing. Not that, again, Pitbull can't beat these guys. I think he's still at a high enough level to do that. But if you're the UFC and he gets this win over Yair Rodriguez, it's like, well, we know Evloev is probably still going to be there afterwards, whereas your just time is a lot less with Pitbull. So from that standpoint, I feel like you almost have to. And I'm saying this after I was just like, man, poor guy should probably be in the title fight. But realistically, I could totally see him getting passed over again. So he's just in a rough spot, man.
Does Evloev have a nickname? Because if not, it should be chopped liver, right? Like he's got to like his.
He's in that spot.
Dude's all circumstantial at this point. It's like I hope the miracles happen. It's almost like the Ankalaev thing, right? Like because they don't want to be in the Magomed Ankalaev business necessarily, and especially when you have a guy like Pereira. But there's a point in time when you're like, we kind of have to give this dude the shot. It looks glaringly bad for everybody if we don't. So I feel like Evloev may be in that kind of spot, which is kind of crazy. Drake, I think you agreed with me on this. The dude, I love watching his fights. Every time he fights, it's fascinating to me. I don't understand the kind of critique and scrutiny we put on that guy. I feel like every time he kind of delivers in my mind.
No, I mean, I think I was one of the few of us on staff when we were doing our year-end awards. I thought that was one of the fights of the year, him and Sterling. I really enjoyed that just because it's so rare that we see those just complete, like a wrestling match in MMA that delivers with just, that beautiful technique that we saw from those two. Of course, that's never going to win the popular vote, right? But for the sickos out there like us, it can be great. It can be a great time. Just his problem is he so desperately needs a single finish, just one finish. Whoever he fights next, if he can go out there and let's say Cruz Mizugaki him, I'm just throwing that out there because Dom's been in my mind this week, of course, missing him.
Sure.
But something like
especially
that.
Since he was to be on your event, he was supposed to be there.
Exactly. Yeah, kills me, man. But he needs to start somebody, right? And he's in a spot now where that's going to be tougher considering the opponents he's going to get. So if he would have went out there and finished Sterling, let's say even at the end of that great fight that they had, we might not even be having this conversation right now.
Well, fellas, just bear in mind that I had one big bold prediction this year. And what was it, Pete? Do you recall?
No, I had too many.
Evloev would be the champion come the end of the year. So somehow, some way,
that is a bold prediction. That is a bold prediction. Like
just given we're sitting here talking about his obstacles, they're introducing him to this point. They're like throwing, hey, what about Pitbull over here?
Yeah.
I didn't even think about the backup element until Drake said it. Like Patricio Pitbull could end up fighting for the title.
Dude, he's 37.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that?
I'm saying, is that your age? He's 37, and if he doesn't, if he's going to be viable as a challenger, if you want to have him in there, you're going to have to do it sooner than rather than later, right? Like especially if he gets by Yair. It is set up for him to, even at 4-3. I think he's only 4-3 in his last 7 fights. But even given that information, if he goes in there and he does this, UFC kind of loves to do this. This type of situation. When Chandler came over, that is a good comparison because when Chandler came over, I think he was 34 years old. It seemed like he was older because he'd been around forever, but he was only 34 for that Hooker fight. And it has a similar feel. You know what I mean? Like you feel like they kind of get a little bit of special treatment. You feel like the UFC is always kind of like them. That's different than say MVP, who came over and they're like, there's a little bit of reluctance to kind of give him the shine.
Yeah. The subject of our thumbnail, which we know is very important business in this video environment, was Patrick Pimblett, also known as Paddy, also known as the Paddy Pimblett. He's getting this big fight against Chandler, and he teased it I want to say a month ago. I think he used the Chandler see you at the top line. I don't know if you saw this. We've got Chandler playing around here as well, don't we, Jordan? We've got Chandler's attempt at taking the piss out of the young Scouser. Look at this. I mean,
oh man,
wow. These are fighting words.
Top heel these days, isn't he?
Oh yeah.
I mean, he's looking in great nick. I'll give him that much. He always does. But I seen I was talking to a few members of staff about this, and they were kind of like, "Oh, this a moment of truth for Paddy Pimblett and stuff like that." I've been covering the guy since his teenage years. I'm fairly confident he has a good skill set, and I was always confident of that. I know he hasn't put on some. I know he's put on some fights that people were very critical of. But do you see it like that, Chuck? Like this is one of them fights where it's like, if he can get through Chandler, then we'll.
Yeah. I mean, this reminds me so much of like back in the day we did the MMA beat, and Jeff Wagenheim, the man in the shirt, this Hawaiian shirts. He'd always sit there and be like, every time Conor fought, yeah, but I got to see him against, this or this, and all the way up until like I think he got through Mendez, and Aldo and others like, all right, he's good, that sort of thing. I already feel like we were having this discussion, man. We were already having this discussion with King Green. I know that he's not a top 15, like top 10 type of guy. But they had bad blood, and we were like, don't sleep on Green. I mean, this is one of those things, you got him all motivated. He's coming in there. He's very dangerous. He'd had a little bit of a resurrection as, down the stretch. I felt like we were kind of like, if he goes through Bobby Green, you know what I mean? He goes through him easily. I think that would tell me that he's where we think he should be, whatever it is, 6-0, whatever. And he did.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I do think this is an escalation. This isn't Tony Ferguson again. This isn't the exact same thing. Like Tony was on a true skid, and I think we could see just how compromised his reactions were and stuff to getting hit, things like that. We were seeing it very much. I don't really feel like Chandler's like that. Chandler's just been more hell-bent on like, dude, I'm going to go out guns blazing every time, win the bonus and get as many endorsement deals and take the biggest spots I can take. You know what I mean? Like he's seizing the moment. So I feel like it's a little bit different. Now, will he accommodate Paddy and leave his chin open for business? Probably, but that's what makes it fun. You know
Absolutely.
What I mean?
Absolutely. He's going to do it. Drake, what do you think of it?
I love it, man. I think it's perfect from every aspect in terms of the step up for Paddy, and then, a very winnable fight for Chan.
Have we lost Drake's sound there? I have.
Drake, you still there? I felt like a sound went out for me too, but I was like, that's probably just my computer.
Yeah, I was doing a trying to look normal face.
I know, me too. I'm like, yeah.
Great point, Drake. We'll figure it out. Drake is getting calls from editors and stuff like that. He's a very important member of the team. So things like this happen.
He is a hardworking fellow. He really
I just don't answer. Never answer. So I don't really know what they say.
Yeah.
But we'll get Drake back as soon as possible.
Right.
Are you getting an element of the selective bookings here, Chuck, off this? Because I saw people talking about this online. Like, are the UFC protecting a potential golden goose in this guy?
I don't know, man, because that didn't seem that way to me. Did it feel that way to you? Like when he got Ferguson, it felt a little bit like that. But then Green, that was a vulnerable fight, man. Like it was a dangerous fight, and I feel like this one is obviously a dangerous fight. It's not. Michael Chandler's been fighting just absolute beasts, man, and he's been hanging with all of them. It's not like it's not like you're throwing some dude who's you know what I mean, like just can't take a punch anymore or anything like that. This is a guy who's is still a buzzsaw, and if he ever chose to just start wrestling a little bit again, like even just a little bit where he just kind of mixes it in more rather than just putting on a show, I'd actually be favoring Chandler. But as it is, I think that Pimblett showed us enough. You know what I mean? Like over to actually take him seriously now. So I think it's the proper escalation. It's a guy with a name, and where Chandler has been playing in those top spaces, all the guys in the top spaces, if Pimblett beats him, where should that land Pimblett? It should land him in those top spaces. So I feel like it's the right fight.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that Paddy has his critics, and he has had his whole career. Like he is like the kind of guy who wants to make people. He wants to make people react, and we know that's a very important thing to have in this sport. And he's been doing it since he's a teenager. Like I've captivated by this guy, not through his fighting ability initially, but through his interviews. Like back in 2013, 14, he's calling out McGregor. While McGregor
Yeah.
hasn't yet even made his full ascent, he's given it socks after winning like a regional title. That's how I first fell in love with the guy. He was being interviewed by Severe MMA back then. But
Here's
here's the
what you got to
thing.
look at. Like he gets through Chandler, right? Like he gets through Chandler, and then it's like, you
That's
know,
this is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Ilia and him. Like he's been almost like kind of planting that seed forever, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Like
I
it's just
mean,
kind of,
I was at that event where it kicked
yeah.
off. I was in London, and I think Topuria fought Joy Herbert. It was a dodgy, fight for him at 55 just because of Joy's size, and we'll talk about Ilia and his size compared to Islam. Rick made some good points about that yesterday on the boys in the back. But to your point, say if Aspinall and Jones doesn't happen, and we have, I
Mm.
know Dana recently said like, oh, everyone relax, it's going to happen. But say that happens, right? And then you have Brady, which is a way worse matchup for Leon Edwards, I feel, than Jack Della Maddalena. Say Brady goes in and just flattens, just wrestle fucks the shit out of Leon Edwards and wins that fight. And
Oh,
then your big win for the UK in the first half of 2025 could potentially be Paddy
mm.
over Chandler. Like that propels him as one of the biggest draws from the UK. I think it puts him up there with the likes of Aspinall and Leon immediately, pretty much, if he does it.
It's weird because he already went like this almost Beatle-esque like moment. I think
Yeah.
it's in part because of his hair and all that, but like way before he fought in the UFC, Ariel was having him on the show. People were talking about Paddy Pimblett in the States. It almost cooled off as he went, but I feel like if anything was going to kick back into its full potential, like in terms of seeing this guy at the biggest moment, it would be that. I do believe that he has a moment. I don't feel like it's almost like the way people have turned on him, if they have at all, is in such a weird way that has nothing to do with caring about his fights, you know? And I feel like as long as that is in place, and he would force us to care about his fights if he puts himself into those situations, it'll come roaring back times 10. You know what I mean? So I think that all of that is still in front of him. It's a very interesting spot. Given we were on that phone when Leon won, right? Like
Yeah.
when we did that post fight show, and Leon, it was, I've never heard countrymen call in crying like that and just kind of
He was our
associate.
age. You know what I
I
mean?
know,
Like,
it was just
it was
bizarre.
crazy.
So like you kind of think about that in terms of what Paddy might mean to people over there and everything. So I think that there's huge potential if he does get that far.
Yeah, and one thing I will say, like all you can see all the chatter online, and like it would almost like I know a lot of people argue that it's not the real world at all. Social media, what you're seeing on
Yeah.
there is just it's like an echo chamber to some degree. But when he walked out in Manchester that night, it was one of the biggest pops of the night. Him and Aspinall. Now Leon got a big one while he walked out, but obviously the fight with Belal didn't go the way the crowd wanted it to, so the atmosphere changed significantly.
Yeah.
But Paddy coming out, it was like a fucking Oasis concert or something. Like
It's crazy, man.
it was just people
See, I would like to
losing
see
their
that at some
minds.
point. If it gets to that point where he's kind of headlining a big event, where that would be fun to see. I love when you can hit an atmosphere at its absolute peak. You know what I mean? Like where things can't get any better for that moment.
I got to see him fight when he was on the regional scene too, and he's made for headline moments. He has been made. He has built himself that way since he was a very young fighter. So I fully expect him to get through Chandler, and I believe we have Drake back. Do we have Drake back? Is it the return of Drake? Not quite.
Not
I can't
quite.
get
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
He's-
His beef with Lamar is still going. Well, we'll try it again in a few.
Are we there?
There he is.
Oh,
Okay. All right.
Drake. We had
My
an epic
microphone's
conversation
died.
there. We had an
Ah.
epic conversation. I don't know if you missed it, but me and Chuck were absolutely killing it. We were destroying the place.
Fire. Torch.
Best stretch of podcast we've ever had.
Oh man. In all the podcast history.
We're just saying about Paddy's kind of star potential. I know he's hit some rocky roads and he's had his critics, but we're just kind of saying like if he gets this win over Chandler, like he feels like a ready-made headliner for the UFC, particularly in the UK, right?
Yeah, no, certainly. I think that's probably what the UFC would prefer, in terms of the outcomes here. And again, if he's beating a guy like Michael Chandler, then they have every justification to put him in a bigger fight. But at the same time, my mind still goes to, we're missing out on that Moicano one potentially by getting this one. But at the same time, I think beating Michael Chandler might prove a little bit more, and the Moicano fight should still be there afterwards. In terms of if it's bigger or not, doesn't really matter because Paddy has that option to be a headliner. Not that he couldn't by now, but getting a win over Michael Chandler here, a guy who has been around for so long, the hardcores know him, and the casuals know him by now. Just for having the series or the saga with Conor alone, forget about him fighting. People know him about being the guy who didn't fight at this point, which is kind of crazy. But I think that a win here for Paddy would, I don't know how much it would really boost him in terms of significantly, because he's already in such a great spot. The problem with him, I think, is we're not seeing him as much, I think if Paddy maybe gets a little bit more active, but as we know, all these guys, once they reach a certain point, that slows down. Look at Chimaev for a prime example, when he was looking like he was going to fight every weekend for a moment there when he burst on the scene in the UFC. But I think this guy is really the limit with Pimblett.
It's really about the kind of fixtures of the top of the division, because that's where Chandler has been, with these guys, fighting these guys. And I think that it's just that, right? Like you beat the guy who's been in that spot and been holding that spot for a long time, and it puts you into that spot. So I think that that's kind of that's what's at stake for him. It's just now I can enter the upper, rarefied stratosphere of like this division, and I can and see how I can do against the best of the best. Whatever the case was, if he beats Chandler, especially if he goes through him like he did with Green, I think that that next fight we won't be having a discussion of whether it's kind of preferential treatment or anything like that, because it'll have to be a monster at that point.
Yeah, it's you mentioned the Ilia thing, Chuck. And I'm listening to what Drake is saying about, in terms of, is this what the UFC want by matching Paddy with Chandler, right? And that is a conversation that's certainly happening. Is this selective on their part? My question is, if somehow Ilia, I know there's a lot of hypotheticals here, boys, I apologize. Okay? But say
should I be taking notes?
I'm trying myself, keeping my train of thought here with this little pen. If Ilia, right, say, is a situation where Ilia ends up as the lightweight champion, and Paddy is coming off a win over Michael Chandler, and we know there's so many people between them. Okay, I'm acknowledging that. This is the point of the
everyone
thing
else turns into Movzar. They all turn into Movzar at that point. It's like
that's what I'm trying to say. Is that? Do you think so, Chuck? If that happened, if
it could happen,
he is a big enough draw to be put in this situation. No,
Paddy.
No, I'm getting. Tell me, I'm getting ahead of myself.
The other thing is like you're hammering home like a fight that you may not get otherwise, and then this would be more toward it would be more toward like the doubt that Paddy could hold his standing long enough to be a legitimate contender, versus Ilia being able to hold it down long enough for Paddy to get to him. I think Ilia is that good. He's able to do it. So if you were really a UFC and you're like, well, this might be our one shot to just kind of vaguely justify putting these two guys together. Dude, we've seen them do crazy things like this in the past. They could do that.
Endo Bisping.
Yeah. Oh yeah, exactly.
So it wasn't as stupid as a point as I think it was, Drake. Did I put?
I'm sure the people.
I did not expect that. I'll tell you that much. Out of all the. There's been so much happening this week, I guess, but that never crossed my mind until you just said.
Where was Khalil Roundtree in the pecking order? I don't even know the official rankings when he got a shot. You could point, not that that's necessarily the same thing, but sometimes
you're not one of these Sean O'Malley guys, are you?
Sean O'Malley was kind of shot through a cannon up to the top, wasn't he? Like it's almost like it just depends on if the UFC wants to try to justify that or not.
I want to circle back though, real quick to Chuck saying how if Paddy goes out there and submits Michael Chandler, which can we agree is that's his best path?
That would be a good way to do it. Yeah,
I think he can knock him out. Like I know he's not the most technical guy, but as Chuck was saying earlier, if Chandler does what he tends to do, and
which he will,
put himself straight into a
you don't need that hypothetical. We know how he fights.
Like Paddy can certainly plant his feet and throw powerful shots. I don't think he's the most technical guy in the world. I think he's brilliant on the ground, but I think that's a possibility too. Sorry, Drake, I'm cutting you off there. You go ahead. What were you saying?
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say, I think we got to realize how insane it would be actually if Paddy was to submit him, because Michael Chandler is a guy who has only been submitted one time,
Hmm.
and it was against Dustin Poirier after, kind of the war that they went through. So you can argue that
Wow.
the submission wasn't as impressive as it still was, but Michael Chandler is a guy who survived on the ground in his last fight with Charles Oliveira. And in the first fight, he's done it twice, and then he survived Goichi Yamauchi and Bellator, Brent Primus, like guys who are legitimately terrifying for their grappling. If Paddy Pimblett was to become the guy who actually caught him in something,
That's a
I
good point.
mean, like you could justify it alone off that, PT. So I'm helping your case here, man.
Listen, we've all made great points here today, but our collective one on this one, I think,
Is idiocy.
Yeah, yeah.
But get ready, right? This is going to be interesting because, as I was saying, I don't know if you heard this, Drake, you're away at the time, but Paddy has had like this course to fighting Connor his whole life. So he's the next guy in that. Well, not the next guy directly, I don't think, but he's the next big star of Cage Warriors after Connor goes to the UFC in 2013. Paddy Cage Warriors kind of came back in around 2014. Paddy becomes the face of the brand. He takes the featherweight title. I know I sent it to the lads on the show the other day. There was a picture of a famous promotion they did in Ireland. The biggest bookmakers here is called Paddy Power. He's like a bookie, and they did this promotion where it was 5-1 for Paddy to beat McGregor by 2020 or something like that. Now,
Wow.
since then, they've made friends. Like Paddy and Molly have shown up in the Black Forge and stuff like that. But mark my words, Connor's not going to be able to help himself. If Paddy beats Chandler and the whole Chandler and
Oh,
Connor
man.
thing
That's a
happens,
great point too.
Wow.
I can suddenly see that being the fight that everyone's like, oh, Paddy v. Connor, they both talk with funny accents. Let's get them in there to sort this out
I could
for
totally
good.
see that. The more I think I'm sitting here thinking about that, I could totally see this happening. You know they're going to be chirping anyway, but I could see this happening 100%. And that would have to somewhat be an inviting fight for as much of a fight that you could look at of a guy who has that kind of juice in that spot, right? That I think that McGregor could look at and be like, I could beat him,
Yeah,
That
and
would be
Paddy
the guy.
definitely feels that way as well. Like, there's
Right.
no way Paddy's like, I'm worried about 36-year-old Conor McGregor. There's no way.
Yep. Yeah.
Just prepare your bodies for that one. Is all I was trying to say there. But
It's like such a circus with Paddy too. It's like this is what's fun, right? Like you just
Yeah.
don't know. It's like it's a bunch of wildness too.
it's crazy. And dude, like, you were mentioning like he was on Ariel's show, and he was since about 2015. He's been on that show. He went away because his career was over. Like, people were telling him his hand was broken to the point when he was fighting
Yeah.
Soren back. They're like, don't fight. Like, you
Yeah.
literally cannot grab anything with that hand. And he's like, oh, I'm gonna throw myself back in here. But from one you
Severe
guys,
depression and everything too, right? Like he had
Yes.
some dark times there.
he's overcome a lot, man. He's got a wild story, and I'm sure he's gonna lay it out for us all one day. I know he's already got documentaries on BBC and stuff like that, but when it's all said and done, it's gonna make for a hell of a show. One you get UK guy to another. Leon Edwards, opponent switched. Who drew the short straw here, right? Because I saw the lads yesterday saying Jack Della Maddalena, like Belal will, if he can get this guy down, it's a nightmare. But Leon, coming off the Belal fight, is preparing for a striker. And now it's like, oh, guess what, mate? Sean
That's the
Brady.
worst. That's the worst.
Oh,
man.
Belal with the
Yeah.
cold tweet. Dang, I stole Leon's belt and his opponent. Oh, shit. Oh, shit, Belal. Drake, what do you think? Who drew the shortest straw here? Is it Jack Della Maddalena or is it Leon Edwards?
Man, it's this whole welterweight thing is super. I don't know about bizarre, but it still has my head spinning, right? Because I love how Bilal's playing with it like that. Because yeah, he did exactly a thief in the night, if you will. I mean, I think Leon. I think the style change is going to be something that could affect him maybe more than Bilal in terms of what he'll have to prepare for now, and a guy in Sean Brady who just perfectly well rounded in every area. Like, I think he can give Leon a lot more fits maybe in multiple places than let's say a JDM could have. Whereas, you know, of course, JDM would have gave him a lot of problems in the boxing and on the feet, striking like that. Not that Brady can as well. It's just Leon is going to have to think more, right? And the preparation to get ready for a guy like Sean Brady, I think more time would serve him better. Whereas opposed to, you know, the other end of the coin there, a guy like Belal, he's going to go in and do the same thing no matter who he's going against. So Jack has his hands full there. And it's pretty close, but I think Leon is kind of the odd man out in this case.
I think it's Leon 100%, man. That's a 25-minute sentence he just received. Like, you look at what Brady, you know, just his last couple of fights, you know, with like Gastelum and Burns, wasn't it? It was a Burns, and I think that I was looking this up at some point. In those two fights, 12 takedowns, 20 minutes of control, and he just makes it such an existential hell, like, right? And I mean, so Leon just now, it's like was supposed to be a bounce back and like in this big way where I think he had a pretty good matchup there. To be honest, it goes into something else, and this is one of those things you're like, oh, because you can see a scenario where he is just completely nullified of what he wants to do. We've said this about Leon before. There've been a couple times, especially in the when he was fighting Usman, where he actually holds his own in ways that you don't believe he will be able to. I'm just not sure, man. This is two tides kind of going different ways here, and that's the problem with it, right? I think that Brady comes in, he's like, this is a huge opportunity, and I think he shows up ready to do work, you know. So I feel like this is a horrible draw for Leon.
We used to discuss this on the Ringer show we were doing, me, you, and Ariel, where there was this clump of welterweight prospects: Ian Gary, Shavkat Rakhmonov, Sean Brady, Jack Della Maddalena, and of course now you got Joaquin Buckley of Carlos Prates in there as well. But this feels like a massive changing of the guard year for welterweight, right? Like potentially, right? Look at the way they've matched this. It's Leon v Brady. It's Belal v Jack Della Maddalena. We know Shavkat's sitting in the spot to basically fight the winner, you'd imagine, of JDM v Belal. Ian Gary is there. Joaquin Buckley as well. It just feels like for so long, right? And we'll all remember this from covering the sport. Welterweight was just Kamaru Usman cycling between Jorge Masvidal.
Oh my God, that was the worst era.
And Colby Covington. Now what we have here,
occasionally Wonder Boy popping in. Hey, fellas,
please come on, come on, guys, give me a goddamn opportunity. Yeah, even look, Carlos Prates. We forget how many fights have been announced on 314. Carlos Prates v Jeff Neal on that card as well. Like, this is a monumental changing of the guards, is it not, Drake? At welterweight, if it happens, it has the potential to be, I should say.
I mean, it's already been slowly happening, right? With these guys who are in there now, the Buckleys and the Garys. And I mean, even the Shavkats just reaching the heights that they have. And with Carlos Prates' last year alone, by the end of this year, it can look a whole lot different. If you look back at even, let's say, 2023, I don't remember exactly what the rankings were, but I'm sure they looked pretty similar to the guys you listed off right there. So it's like, it is really going through a big wave of changes, and depending on how some of these fighters get booked, in particular the ones that are still hanging around, like the Colbys and the Usmans, who I don't know how many more Colby will have. I mean, he's a one fight a year type of guy anyway. And then assuming maybe whether they want to book Ian against Buckley, rebook that one coming up soon, they'll still be in the rankings regardless. And then it's just a matter of if they can like flush out Usman. But yeah, it's a really fun time. It's a really fun time for welterweight, which has always been one of those kind of premier glamour divisions a little bit. Like I always think historically of light heavyweight and welterweight as those ones where you're like, there's always something going on with a great legacy being built by somebody. And we're kind of now in that point of, all right, who's the next guy? Belal, as great as he has been to get there, like he's too late, I think, in his career to become one of these guys, even though he's tried to make the arguments a little bit about what I think he said he's the second best already behind GSP, or he wants to be the GSP. It's just father time is going to catch up, man. And he's on the wrong end of it. So we're looking at the Shavkats and these guys that we're all mentioning here. So it's going through the cycle for sure. And I'm very excited. Yeah. Yeah.
I will say that Belal, it's crazy, man, because I think his is such a quiet sort of tyranny. The dude just doesn't lose, but like we kind of always are like, oh, these other dudes, I think we've circled Shavkat forever, right? And that was going to be fascinating in its own way. Just like, this is you're going against a guy who makes your life hell. In Belal, like this is not going to be a cakewalk for Shavkat. But now, obviously, like it changes up. But can you imagine if by the end of the year we're having this conversation and Belal keeps holding court? You'd almost be like, this is kind of nuts. We're really focusing because I've done this the whole time. Like you focus on other guys. And you don't really pay attention to Belal. But if he's able to, like, say that he's able to get through Della Maddalena, and then all of a sudden he beats Shavkat, you'd be like, this is insane because nobody is beating that caliber of guys again and again. So I agree with you on whole, in theory, I guess, with Drake. But I'm like, at the same time, I do believe that Belal will have something to say in this. If he wants to have that legacy or if he wants to come near it, he still has a big say in how he does that, right?
Yeah. We just got a note there from the great on-air Jordan saying Anthony Hernandez, Mr. Fluffy, probably yards from where.
Isn't that
Drake
what the nickname means? It means a little bit chubby, right? Like,
is that what it means? It means you're a bit chubby.
Yeah.
Start calling me Fluffy Carroll.
Yeah, we could.
That would also
that's nice.
It's going to
like
count
that.
for my back hair too.
Yeah,
and my tuft of bullshit on my head. But Anthony Hernandez, how long does he have? Is it an extra? Does he have an hour and 15 minutes, Drake, or is it just at the top of the hour? It's over here. Do you know?
It should kind of depend on. I think it'll depend on up to him. He should have 1 hour left if he wants to try and still cut it. But there's a 12-minute window. We're on the countdown right now. So.
Oh my God!
Interesting.
Well, on air Jordan will keep us updated.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to that one. I hope it doesn't fall through.
I know, right?
Yeah, do you know, Fluffy is one of those guys. No, I'll tell you what, we're going to talk about Seattle in 2 minutes. We just have to get through this. We just have to get through this Topuria thing because I was very interested yesterday. Ariel's on the boys in the back talking about it, and the lads were prodding him the way I would have because I think everyone saw these announcements, right? And Dana didn't say specifically anything about it, but in all of our heads, the subtext was, "Oh, Ilia Topuria is fighting Islam Makhachev." Like that was a subtext in our heads. Ariel explained it very well, and it made sense. He said to the boys, like, do you really think Topuria would put himself in this situation? Like he would vacate a title with no guarantee that he is fighting the 155-pound champion. I think that makes sense to some degree, right? Like at least he was given some assurances. Where they happen, I don't know. But I do believe that Ariel is correct in that. Like he would have had to get some kind of guarantee.
But if you say, I can't make 145. Now, is this the case or not? Like that I simply cannot make 145. This means that you are not necessarily volunteering and vacating so much as you're saying, I can't. And they're saying, well, you can vacate and move up. You know what I mean? Like, I agree. That would be on the surface, that should be what's going to happen. That would make sense. But if he can't make 145, there's a little bit of me that's just like, well, he kind of had to force himself out of there then. And I'm not 100% sold that he'll get it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like it could go another direction. I agree. Like mostly, like, I don't know why they would play around and not do that because he is a reigning champion and all that stuff. But it's weird, right? Because it sounds like his circumstances also kind of forced him out. It wasn't like he was just like, I've cleaned out the division. This is it. I've done all I can do.
And there's no such thing as a guarantee in this sport, is there, Drake? Like, there's no way you can take someone's word one day and 3 months later you're like, oh, that's still good, right? We're still good with this. That's how I feel, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, to kind of circle back to Colby Covington, and I mean Tony Ferguson. These guys used to be interim champs, and then they had their belts taken away from them.
That's right.
Remember this?
Yeah, true.
Nothing, even though there's a physical guarantee, is still not the best guarantee. I don't know about you guys, but I don't for a second really believe that he can't make 145. I don't believe that at all. I think it's all been a negotiation kind of ploy that he's been playing.
That's what I mean. Is if it's on that terms, and he's like, okay, let's just say this is what we'll say. Obviously, he has to get the shot. But if he really believes he couldn't, that sort of forced their hand, and so that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. But what I was gonna say is, like, that is where the conversation went. Like, we saw Shaheen's tweet. I think the lads had it on their show yesterday. We might have it here now. Basically, Shaheen just kind of lined out, like, if he has. So here it is. Ilia Topuria.
He ripped me off. He stole my tweet.
He stole that
for him. Yes.
That is typical Al
this is-
Shadi. Typical Al Shadi, to be honest with you. Here's what Shaheen tweeted after seeing Drake's tweet. Can we just get that back? Sorry, Jordan. I didn't get. Thank you, mate. Ilia Topuria knocking out Alexander Volkanovski and Max Holloway, then jumping up a division and dethroning a prime Islam Makhachev would legitimately be the greatest 3-fight run in MMA history. And look, fair play to him for echoing Drake's sentiments there with that tweet. And we also had a Ben Folks article, which was largely, in my opinion, it was just an elongated version of Drake's tweet as well.
Yeah.
If you want my opinion on this, there it is.
There's a book coming out about Drake's tweet at some point this year.
Should be. Damn it.
And we've also right. So we got all this, and basically we're all in the same thing, going, "Oh, this is going to happen." Then we had Islam's manager put out this tweet, and I suddenly got very worried. Here he is, Rizvan Magomedov, Topuria v Dustin or Charles contender fight to prove he's legit lightweight. So we don't have to defeat another small featherweight in quotations. We need big fight that makes sense for everyone. We already gave chances to featherweight champ. That was reigning for a long time. Now, I
love how they're always resistant. It doesn't matter who. Doesn't matter who's coming at them. It's like, I don't know, man. Did they deserve it? You know.
We did have this though from Submission Radio. I forgot to shout out the boys. I used one of their clips last week and was like, here's a random video. The great lads of Submission Radio. We have Javier Mendez who's done an interview here. Let's have a quick listen to this if we can, Jordan, because it might settle our concerns.
If it was International Fight Week for you, Javier, is that good timing to prepare for someone like Ilia Topuria?
Yeah, of course. I mean, anybody. I mean, all Islam needs is 2 months to prepare for anybody. He's not going to care who he fights. You know, you make 155, you know, we all have the same attitude. We fight, you know, you pay us. This is who you're offering. He's not going to say no. If that's who they offer, that's who's been worked out, is who's on the table for Islam. That's what Islam's going to do. That's just the way he is. He's a true warrior. He's not somebody that's going to say, no, give me somebody else. No, he's going to fight. That's the way it is. You know, we're a champion. We're number one for a reason. We're not supposed to reject any person they throw in front of you. You know, he will do what a champion's supposed to do.
Now, it was actually the great on-air Jordan who brought this point up to me because we knew we had the tweet. He then sends me the Javier Mendez thing, and I was like, oh, well, this is very promising. And I don't know if you mind me saying this on air, Jordan, but you can't speak directly to me right now, so I'm going to go ahead and throw you under the bus. He was like, well, isn't that exactly what you'd expect from a manager, first of all, saying like, oh, I don't know about this. Like, why would you want us to do this? Like, as in probably giving himself a negotiation leg to stand on when he's there. Well, if we're going to fight
to hear
this
the beep of the Bing truck.
Yeah. And then we have, on the other hand, you have Javier Mendez, a guy who was only in this to win titles. But yeah, look, it's an interesting situation, and we should probably actually talk about
Can I just say real quick?
Go ahead. Sorry.
If they do fight, right? Like if Ilia challenges Islam, and I know people are like, oh my God, this is insane. This is crazy. It would be. But would it be so different in your minds than when Volk was on his streak and he went to challenge like Islam? I think the biggest difference is that we have a bigger appreciation for Islam now than we did then. And part of that appreciation was built by Volk going up there and him handling Volk. But to me, it feels like almost a very similar type of situation. Yeah. Like, does it feel different to you guys? Like, I know that we wherever it's in front of us is what we're like, oh my God, this is huge. But sometimes you look back and like, we kind of did this once.
It was a recency bias, isn't there?
Yeah.
Because he's the hot shit now. No, you're right, though. Remember how fired up we all were for Volk?
Oh, man, it was huge. It was huge.
It was a big battle.
And I mean, the first fight obviously panned out in such a brilliant way that it was like, Volk starts coming on late. It actually kind of boosted his stock. I remember having this whole discussion about it. You're like, wow, Volk is better than we thought, even in a loss. It's just, I feel like we've kind of been through it. But it does make Ilia, if he's able to go in there and actually win it, it would then transcend that, because I think that you'd be like, okay, now this dude actually went up and actually accomplished what Volk couldn't do.
Yeah. It's a wild one. Are you shocked by the line, lads? It's let me just pull this up here. -280 Islam, +220 Ilia Topuria. Is that weird for any of you guys? Make sense?
I think it'd be a little bit closer. Maybe -200 at worst for.
Yeah, that seems more. That does seem kind of high. That seems like they're not giving Ilia much of a chance. Is that the size thing, Pizza, you think, or is it obviously he is coming up, but is that like straight up?
He's also fought at lightweight before, though, you guys. We got
yeah. That's
Yeah,
true.
the UFC.
Joy
Yeah.
Herbert, but like he went down in that fight. Joy,
Yeah.
look, and Joy's a great boxer. He's very slick. He put him down
Yeah.
in the first round of that fight, and Ilia came back. But
Ilia's weird because what is he, like 5'7"? So I think that the tendency is to think he's a little smaller, but when you see him, like he's
Yeah.
thick, man. So
big aura.
yeah,
He's got a wild
big aura.
to him.
That
Yeah.
aura weighs at least 20 pounds by itself.
But I was thinking about this when Rick actually went through a crazy basic diagram he had put in place in his mind for what Volkanovski looked like against Islam. I think Topuria is an inch taller than Volkanovski. So he's kind of saying, like, do you remember how crazy that looked? Do you know when Islam and Volkanovski start fighting and you're like, Jesus Christ, these lads look 3 weight divisions apart. It's going to be pretty much the same thing, you'd imagine. So I think that's a factor, especially against a grappler. Like once there's a bit of fucking size in the difference there, it's like being on steroids. Like you can absolutely manhandle dudes when you're bigger than them. So yeah, look, it's interesting. I'm sure it's going to be tied with Aspinall and Jones for the topics that we.
Dana says it's coming. Just hold on there, PC. Hold your horses.
I already fucking put the article out last week. Fuck.
Should have held your horses.
Shit. Things can change so quickly. Tell us, please, Drake. We have you in here to give us the juice on Seattle. We had a shitload of stuff to get through there beforehand. We don't even know if Anthony Hernandez is fighting here, for God's sake. He's just been bumped up to the comment.
He made weight.
Hey!
Yeah, come on, that fuck.
That is
was us.
good, man. I did not want to lose that fight. That's actually the one I was thinking about. I did this should be coming out today at some point on Fluffy, so make sure to check that out, boys.
That's a beast. But
Yep.
tell us what's tickling your fancy over there, Drake. Is there anything that we might not be seeing that you're feeling now that you have your finger on the pulse of Seattle?
My goodness. Yeah, there's a lot to like on this card, top to bottom, as we kind of discussed earlier. The main card in particular is really solid. But then even throughout, you look at the prelims, we got these freaks like Ivan Kutilaba's back against Ivo Aslan in the last fight of the prelims, which that should be a banger. Andre Fili's on this card. I mean, Ricky Simone, you look at this guy was headlining against Song Yudong, who is still headlining this card a couple fights ago. He's on the prelims too. Like, they stacked it out pretty good, at least with notable names, and he's going against Javed Bashara too, so that's a great fight. And then we get the surprise Mr. Van Zandt making his debut just on days' notice, by the way, you guys. Austin Vanderford in the most roundabout way possible, I would say, to get to the UFC. I mean, he's here, baby. Bellator's gone. We're in Seattle, so he's on the card. That should be a fun one against Nikolai Varetnikov. But man, we got a double dose of Gian Matsumoto and Gian Silva going back to back on the main card, you guys, and both of those should be great. Matsumoto, of course, filling in for Dominic Cruz, which never gonna meet the expectation there. I was so hyped for just seeing Dominic Cruz. I'm very biased in that case, but I think it's a great test. I mean, could very well be too much too soon for Matsumoto and on short notice, especially I guess the guy like Rob Font, who I think people are obviously have doubted him in the past, and they're still doubting him in this position, which I find kind of weird because he's like, I believe he's a plus 200 underdog. The odds makers are actually very in favor of Matsumoto, which, undefeated on an absolute tear right now, but it's again a big experience level difference, which I think is going to show up in the fight. I do think Font's going to pull this one off, but there is money to be made there because of the lack of belief in Rob Font, just I guess as the veteran guy here, and I don't know, whatever it may be in that case. And then of course Gian Silva, one of our favorites from last year, Fighting Nerds on a tear, one of the breakthrough fighters, at least one of the contenders that we could have spoken about. And with Fluffy, like we mentioned too, that's a rematch, you guys. I think a lot of people don't realize they fought for the LFA title like right before Fluffy got to the UFC.
Yeah, it was his catapult right before the contender series. Yep.
Yeah, so there's that to look at. A little fun backstory, and then of course the main event I'm super hyped for, and we can talk more about that too. But there's a lot to like, and I'm not just saying it because I'm boots on the ground this week and it's in my neck of the woods, but it's a better offering, again, circling back to the beginning of the show, than what we get in the Apex. That's the best way I can put it.
There's a lot of kind of conversation about this potentially being the end of the cringe era. This might be the last fight of the great Henry Cejudo. Obviously it's been 2 losses on the bounce. This is a guy a success his whole life when it comes to combat sports. What's your impression over there, Drake? Are you getting any feeling one way or the other? I know fighters generally won't come out on the week of a fight and say, this is the last one, lads. No matter what fucking happens, I'm packing it in. But what's the vibe check like?
So first of all, I believe the great Ben Folks will have a piece coming out probably today if it's not out already.
But did you tweet it already? That's what I want to know. Is this based on
I don't know if I tweeted
the premise?
This one.
Yes,
I fucking knew he was doing something. He was always too good. I was like, you know what? I fucking got you now, folks.
Yep, he had some ghost tweets, we could call them there, from your boy, yours truly over here. But no, there was something very interesting that stuck out to me at Media Day on Wednesday, though, you guys, with Henry in particular. And I don't think he has said it before, but he was talking about, at this stage, and you look at kind of where he was at after losing to Merab and what he made that very bizarre kind of random call out of Rob Font. You guys remember this? He was initially angling for more of a guy around, I guess, his age level and experience, if you will. So he spoke about how he actually butted heads really hard with Hunter Campbell in negotiations for this fight because he was wanting to stick specifically to more of Legends fights or guys with the legacy, like maybe even a Cruz rematch. He did talk about possibly being something, but then he came to the realization that if he actually does want to make this run for the title and continue to pursue the whole reason he came back for in, May 2023 against Sterling, that he should take on these guys like Song Yadong who are going to be around, and he should be able to beat them anyways and solidify that place. So when he was talking about that, it made me think, okay, well, he's always going to have that mentality that he had becoming an Olympic athlete and then getting to the championship status. But it made me think, all right, I guess he is probably a little bit serious than I thought he would have been after this. And maybe in his own mind, he was going through that acceptance of, I'm probably not going to get back to a title, especially at bantamweight. There was the possibility of flyweight, which he also teased, right, in this time between now and his last fight. But I think he's committing and realizing, all right, well, I also don't want to cut weight. We'll get rid of the flyweight part. My last chance is here, beat Song Yadong. And I don't know how many more you'd have to win after this, but I think he is taking it very seriously. I think it's a very tough matchup for him. I'm actually not expecting him to win this one. And you can see why over at uncrown.com because should be out now. But I think if Henry loses, though, there's no coming back from that. He absolutely needs to win this one. And because of the indicators I just laid out right there, I think he's treating it like this is kind of do or die for him for sure.
Do you think he gets the respect he deserves, Chuck? Cejudo, like anyone else who's won like belts in multiple divisions, I feel like they're automatically in the conversation as one of the greatest ever. I can remember I was having this debate, possibly with you and Ariel once, and we were getting a load of comments like, how could you possibly even discuss like Henry Cejudo in this situation? But I think it's fair to say that anyone else who's won two divisional titles is usually in that conversation, right? Are they not?
And he would be if you stack the guys who have won titles in different divisions like that, dual champions, he would be the last one considered. I don't know why it is. I guess it's really just a flyweight thing. It is kind of strange. Drake was pointing this out that the flyweights always end up in Seattle. Like some of the greatness is like displayed up there, but it's not generally perceived that way. And it's a very strange thing because remember when when Cejudo basically retired the first time, I think he expected, because he single-handedly he brought back the flyweight division from almost near extinction, right? Like it was going to go, they were trying to kind of phase it out. He kind of keeps it alive by, resurrecting and bringing some people through all that stuff. But it didn't really feel like he got the response he wanted when he retired the first time, and if the UFC was going to I think he thought he had the UFC a little bit and he found out he didn't. And then unfortunately, that's just kind of the perception. Like for whatever reason, man, I've been to multiple of his fights, and I have to say on fight night, he brings it. Like people in the arena, like really respond to what he's doing, whether it's good or bad. But it's just a strange thing in our sport, man. Some of the guys who are that good just don't get the recognition they deserve, you know?
I think the problem with Henry's legacy in particular is that it was too short. I think that is his biggest issue, and maybe the willingness to give up the flyweight title how he did, but really when you look at kind of the vacuum, I guess, of his career, because at that time when we were looking at it, I was like, yeah, I mean, there's a solid case. I might put him at like 5 all time, like as high as 5, but because of what he was doing and how he did it, like, I think he's definitely doesn't get enough credit for it. But again, you look at longevity, it's kind of what you value more, I think, and especially with him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, some crazy. He beat juiced up Dillashaw and everything. This
Yeah,
guy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy.
Fast. It was like a 20-second fight or something, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was very quick.
Yeah. And then there was obviously the Cruz one as well, where people were like, "This is an early stoppage." Then you had, I even remember when he beat DJ. There was lots of people were like, "DJ won that fight." It was like the Nick Diaz and
That's true.
the civil war of Diaz v Condit all over again. 1-2-5, baby. But look, it's going to be a great card. I need John Silva to win so much.
You got a lot of money on him?
No, of just keep fucking losing. I just keep.
This is your little the little thing you do with the
win.
Yeah. Okay.
You know? Yeah, exactly. The little thing that they've asked me to do, and then have just abused me every fucking week.
What you want to do is not be conspicuous in those situations, Pete. Just pick the right guy. That's what you got to do.
Oh shit! Why didn't I wish someone had said this to me earlier? For fuck's sake, this guy fucking picks golden picks over here in Mindenhall.
It's just no trouble for me, but I know how it is for some people. It's okay, man.
I'm just gonna text you and say, "Listen, who the fuck should I go?"
What do we got?
Got the big boxing card in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia tomorrow as well.
Look how you snuck that in at the very end. That's crazy, man.
I know. I talk about it. It's my shame. We had this big boxing card, and it suffered a couple of casualties this week. The most recently, as I said at the top, was during the lads' show when they found out that Daniel Dubois is not fighting, and then Martin Bakole. Yeah,
although that's a good, that's about as good as you can do, you know. Yeah,
that is as good as you could expect. I think that's really dangerous for Parker, by the way.
Big time.
We actually have a little clip, don't we, of Ben Shalom, Jordan, talking about how this was put together as Riyadh season as you can imagine. It was, if we have it there.
Ready. I was up there on the press conference. I couldn't concentrate. I'm not talking. I'm not even looking up. And I apologize if that looked rude. I was trying to make the fight, and we're trying to get it over the line. And came out the press conference, spoke to His Excellency a couple of times. Deal was done in about 15 minutes.
Yeah, well, talk to me about that. When did you know Dubois was pulling out? When did you know Bakole was in?
When did I know? I knew. Look, to be honest, I just saw the news that you saw around Daniel. I wasn't absolutely sure whether it was 100% or not. Obviously, at that point, everyone's putting the names forward. We felt like the only 50-50. You know, this card is about a historic card. This is about a 50-50 card, and for me, that was the only fight to make if you're trying to do this. But for me, everyone deserves a lot of credit. Everyone's taking a lot of risk. But I hope Martin Bakole gets the appreciation of every boxing fan, because to do this on 2 days' notice, a top 5 heavyweight like that, with a final eliminator around the corner, for our entertainment, to add to the greatest card, I believe, of all time, he deserves absolutely every.
You know, I believe that deep pockets helped that situation quite a bit.
What? Whoa! What the fuck are you talking about? These allegations you keep throwing around.
Oh man, it's crazy to me. Like I did a little primer on this whole card, the 7 title fights, that was slated. And it's just crazy to me that it was almost set up like a big time UFC pay-per-view, although with way more titles, because there's more titles in boxing in general, but like there's way more title fights, but you never see this in boxing. But then you get the thing that's the bane of the UFC's existence, which is guys falling out at the 11th hour and them handling it like the UFC does, which is like calling up somebody last second and getting them to fly in for this. This has the feel of a big time MMA fight at this point. Like a big time MMA card, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think they did great with Parker to get him fighting Bakole. He's great. I think Shakur Stevenson, he's also got an opponent flown in. Probably not the same appeal as the Bakole situation, but alas, he is staying on the card. Just wondering, Chuck, has it made you feel, because this is a card that we had seen coming from a long way out. This is going to be huge. We've been talking to Drake about how great the Seattle card is. Has this impacted the card very negatively do you think the Dubois and Parker fight not happening?
I think because it was. I mean, there were some people who I think looked at it, including I think the principals themselves, as maybe it's the real main event, and it sometimes in a big time heavyweight clash like that. It swings in my mind. It does change. It alters. I don't think it really takes away a ton because they did a good job salvaging it. But at the same time, the stakes on that fight kind of change in a weird way for me. And I know that we're just listening to Shalama like kind of pointing out the other way, but Dubois could already wait out Usyk, right? Like he could. He's already kind of there. So he was the one giving Parker a strange chance to just kind of usurp him in that pecking order type of thing. So it changes a little bit because now if Parker loses, who picked, to basically win the fight, but that didn't involve him in the co-main event? I mean, it's just one of those things. In that way, it's very MMA where you get some kind of chaotic, monkey wrench thrown into the whole thing. But if you embrace the chaos, right? Like if you embrace the sort of scrambling and like I've learned to do with MMA a long time ago, I think it makes the boxing event that much more fun in a weird way. Like it makes it, if nothing else, it adds this wild element to it, which I appreciate.
Well, it is going to be a wild weekend of combat sports, my friends. I mean, I think it's going to be like 14-hour stretch or something of from when the Riyadh card fights
oh my lord
to the Seattle card finishes. I think it's going to be like 14 hours, which is me just seeing my Saturday just disappear in front of my eyes as I was saying that. But I'm looking forward to it.
Saturday.
Oh, yeah.
This is the life we chose. But thank you all so much, crackheads, for joining us. Round of applause, Drake, for making the big debut.
Well
on
done,
his favorite
lad. Well
show
done.
on the Uncrowned Network. I mean, he said that. His words. We have Ben Folks ripping off this guy's tweets. He said that about my show. My show. Chuck, our show, I should say. The show we do every Friday. My God.
At this point.
Lads, enjoy it. If you're near a church, light a candle for John Silva. I don't think I'm going to ring in sick on Monday if he doesn't win. Honestly, I'm just going to be like, oh, got a bit of an itchy throat there, Ariel. I can't fucking get in. But I'm very excited.
Can you be relegated from that group? Like,
I hope so. Like, I mean, I should have been relegated last week. I think.
Right.
So if it's a possible, I'm open to that.
Never too late.
I'm open to Drake. Do you want to be in on the picks?
Let's jump in.
It's all good for me.
Jump in.
Hey, I already make them every week too.
I mean, you don't go under the scrutiny. It's like in the X-Files when they used to point a light at someone when you come on the show. Like, Petey, you fucked it again. And I'm like, listen, I know I did. But we're going to sign off now. And we all know I struggle with this element of it. I can only tell you all that I love you. It's just so hard to say goodbye to all you beautiful crackheads. Enjoy all the fights. Again, if you're near a church, go in, light a candle for John Silva and hope he massacres whoever he's fighting on this big card.
You don't even know.
We need this to happen. I don't want to even look at the opponent in case it freaks me out beforehand.
You're telling on yourself as to why you're so bad at this, my friend.
Yeah.
You have to look at the opponents? What is this?
Come on. What is that?
What? I mean, but anyway, I'm going to try and go. I love you very much. Thank you to Chuck Mindenhall. Thank you to Drake Griggs, a sensational debut. Thank you to Oscar Losef. Thank you to On Air Jordan. I mean, even throwing in some vocals today. It's absolutely amazing what this guy does. We will see you tomorrow. Well, Eric and GC will. Mysterious Frank, I'm sure On Air Jordan's going to be there as well. He's so excited. He's giving me a big thumbs up here, a big smile on his face for tomorrow. Enjoy that. Enjoy whatever else is coming your way. And we'll talk to you on Monday where hopefully I have turned around a 3-week skid of absolutely bullshit picks with one heroic one for John Silva. I love you very much. Mwah, mwah.